Welcome to episode 4, Balancing Urgent Workplace Survival Needs with the Future State. It's tough to say what the ultimate new normal will be, but it's important to understand how to solve for today's issues while taking into account how those decisions will impact the future. It will take logic, reason, and a strong personal philosophy to avoid or minimize mistakes, yet you still might have to sacrifice now to have the future you want. In this episode, we'll examine ways to do just that. You'll need to clear away possibility for emotional subterfuge, understand your talents, amplify your skill set, and find your career center. Now, by that I mean knowing whether where you once wanted to go is where you want to go now. And if not, making the necessary refinements to work toward a more timely, realistic destination that still incorporates your passion and dreams. I normally begin this process by knowing more about future plans, but for the purpose of this online presentation, we'll start with the present. Most of us are working in volatile situations. The pandemic, the fickle nature of the stock market, layoffs, racial tensions, political standoffs. If you're lucky enough to have a job, chances are you're worried because if you're over 50, you're very vulnerable in today's workplace. If you're unhappy about your current situation, you'd be wise to do a thorough analysis on the risks involved in staying or leaving, making decisions from a fact base rather than emotions. A good place to begin is to look closely at the culture of your company, because your state of happiness depends largely on the compatibility between the culture and yourself. So let's get clear on what corporate culture is. As you're viewing this next video, I'm sure you'll be thinking about the culture in your own company.
Corporate culture can be compared to natural forces, such as winds and tides, which are there in the background, sometimes unnoticed, sometimes obvious. Made of instinctive, repetitive habits and emotional responses, a company's culture is the collection of self-sustaining patterns of behaving, feeling, thinking, and believing that determine the way we do things around here.
When an organization is at its best, a culture is going to energize its employees and it's going to make people feel good about what they do to advance the strategic and operating priorities of the company. It's really an emotional energizer that you can't get anywhere else.
So let's review ways to help you define on a non-emotional level the culture of your own company. But first, a word about personal tolerances. I've worked in corporate cultures where I felt ethically challenged every day. At the same time, a number of my colleagues felt just fine about the cutthroat atmosphere and how employees were treated with disregard and made to understand they were dispensable. The hard truth is, corporate culture can be a matter of personal taste. I have found that a good place to begin thinking about this topic is to read a company's mission statement. Of course, it's going to be a positive, sometimes inspirational statement, an overview of the company's prime objectives. It might also contain a statement about its social objectives, including the commitment to the environment, to the community it serves, and its employees. If you're already an employee of the company, you have an advantage. You get an opportunity to determine if the company you work for is living up to its own mission. It's also instructive to read the CEO's annual letter to stockholders. It's normally located prominently in your company's annual report. It's an assessment of where the company has been historically, what's happening currently, and where it's going in the future. Lots of clues in there. It's a roadmap so that shareholders can get a quick glimpse of the future state while understanding the complexities of the present state. Of course, an overview of the financials would be wise in order to understand what's happening from a financial perspective. A lot can be gleaned here about the stability of the company and the wisdom of its C-suite. These three pieces of public information, on balance, plus your experience of living inside the company, will confirm whether or not your company is living up to its own promise. And if you feel that your equilibrium is healthy, or if the difference between that promise and your personal experience is too much of a gap for your personal comfort, you'll have some science to back up your visceral feelings. Now let's take a look at your company's management culture. Consulting firm Hay McBurr recently defined these 6 styles of management. I've lined up those on the left side of the slide. Directive, or top-down decision-making. Authoritative, where top management sells a vision, then steps back and lets employees work. Affiliative, cultivating harmony with employees. Participative, encouraging employee participation and idea sharing. Pace setting, strong management working toward high standards. And coaching, where management contributes to the long-term professional development of its employees. There are pluses and minuses to all 6 types, and the number of combinations can be daunting. Some might be just right for you, others not. Adding another layer of complexity, on the right side of the slide, I've placed another list of management styles. They pretty much describe themselves. The know-it-all manager, the micromanager, the absentee boss, the self-server, and the best friend. Again, it's a personal choice to like or dislike the culture of your management and depends on your tolerance levels for different types of behaviors. I'll also mention that there's another culture in your office. I call it colleague culture. Many of us have been in corporate situations where management has defined the right of all employees to act exactly the way they want, as long as they get the business. This is particularly prevalent in some sales organizations. If that's the pervasive culture, it's another element in your decision-making process to stay or leave. Toxic colleague culture is a make or break decision for me. Let's talk now about finding and knowing where your career center is. Knowing your career center is often a difficult prospect. By the time you've reached the age of 50, you might have had opportunities that have taken you in many different directions, or you've wanted to change careers, but it seemed a bridge too far. Whatever the case, it might be worth some soul searching to determine if you want to keep moving in the same direction or refine that direction. This is a huge topic that deserves a great deal of attention. I wanted you to know, though, that this ambiguity is a real thing. It's something that, as a coach, I'd spend several sessions on, helping a client through the dilemma that depends on so many other aspects of their life. I'll leave it here for now, however, and move on to the next topic, which is, do you feel good about your work in general? Forbes magazine lists these 10 questions to ask yourself to reinforce your feelings, one way or the other, about the work you're doing, the role you're in, and the company that employs you. Let's go through them. Try to find yourself within these questions. You'll notice we've dealt with many of these issues in previous episodes. Here we go. Do I like the company's mission and culture? Does the management culture suit me? Do I feel challenged ethically or morally? Am I challenged by my work? Am I respected by colleagues and management? Am I secure about my position within the company? Do I use the best of my talents and skills? Am I in a continuous learning process? Does my compensation reflect the scope of my responsibilities? Do I want to do the best work possible every day? So how did you do? These questions can really pinpoint if your work is fulfilling, if you feel secure, if you're making enough money, and if you can respect yourself at the end of the day when you're on your way home. And on that long drive or subway ride, here's a list of statements and questions you should thoroughly vet before you make a decision to stay or push the eject button. First, review the 4 domains of emotional intelligence discussed in episode 3. Know what you're feeling and why you're feeling it. Determine if you can handle distressing emotions and whether you can marshal enough positive emotions to find equilibrium. Know what others in the organization are feeling. Do your research on this, as you might find some way to consensus build toward change, or at the very least, develop some comrades in arms. Are you challenged morally or ethically? Do you have a clear fact base on the issues? Are you mulling over a decision based on facts, what your gut is telling you, or both? Do you know what's next for you, or would leaving put you in a tailspin? Can you afford to be out of work? Is remaining in your current role a risk to your health? Lastly, I'll end with this slide. You've seen it before, earlier in the episode, it asks the salient question: do you know if where you once wanted to go is where you need to go now? You don't want to jump out of the fire into the frying pan. I personally would decide this first before making any decisions, even in an upside down workplace. I want to thank you, and I'm asking you to stick with me for the final episode, a long-term strategic plan that includes career and retirement goals.